So as I titled this presentation, often there is a misconception that cover crops are only for commercial farms, like larger vegetable and fruit enterprises, or even corn and soybean systems. And that's not true. Cover crops can be used by small acreage farms, by homeowners who have a small yard in the backyard, even raised bed crop production or vegetable production in your backyard or your front yard. So cover crops fit both the scales. So that's why I said big or small cover crops for all. So with that, let's dive into the topic of how our cover crops, how these cover crops, which we will talk about today, affect the cropping system, affect the crops in vegetable systems. So even though I'm using production system as for more commercial purpose, but it's very similar to what you have in your backyard. You're growing crops in the summer, you're growing vegetables. It's the same, system. So whenever we add cover crop, we get many of those benefits which I have, circled here. We talk about reducing erosion. So if your land was kind of in a slope and you don't want your good soil to wash away, you want to hold your soil in place, we seed cover crops. And as the name suggests, cover crops. These are the crops that you use to cover the soil, and most often it is at the end of the season, like sometime in September, October, where your vegetables are harvested, there's nothing on the ground. So instead of leaving the ground fallow, you seed a cover crop. So when you seed a cover crop, you get the benefit of reduced erosion. You are adding another crop to your garden, so that improves the biodiversity. So there are more different crops out there. You are when you terminate the cover crop in the spring, you are adding organic matter. And as we all know, organic matter is the foundation when it comes to good, healthy soils. And whenever your soils are healthy, the crops are healthy. So by adding cover crop, you're adding organic matter. Cover crops can also help in reducing compaction. Sites where there is too much of traffic, or the soil is pretty hard and difficult to plant, cover crops, there are certain cover crops that can be used to loosen the soil. Similarly, cover crops help with pest and disease reduction. Absolutely, they help with soil health, and they can also be used for nutrient management. And by that, what I mean is they can be used to add nitrogen and other nutrients to the soil. So the entire gamut of growing a healthy crop and sustaining a healthy soil, cover crops help us to achieve those goals. I'm going to go back to my first slide so that people can. This was my first slide when I talked about the benefits of using cover crops. Reducing erosion, improving biodiversity in the soil, because you are helping those microbes, those root exudates that come out of the cover crop, that helps the microbes. I talked about organic matter accumulation and enhancement, reducing compaction, pest and diseases, again reduction of those, and improving the soil health, overall soil health and quality, and of course nutrient management, where you can limit the amount of conventional fertilizers and use cover crops as a nutrient management, because there are certain cover crops that are in the legume family that can help to add nitrogen by fixing atmospheric nitrogen. So this was my first slide where I laid out the reasoning why one should consider using cover crops. So for homeowners and master gardeners and growers who have smaller plots behind your house and acreage garden, not on a commercial scale, but on a smaller scale, the first thing I encourage you all to ask yourself is, what do you want to achieve? I mean, what do I want to achieve with this cover crop? The cover crops can provide several benefits, as I showed you in the previous slide. So first question is, what is the ultimate goal? Why we are using the cover crop? Will this cover crop grow successfully in my climate? There are certain cover crops that will overwinter here in Iowa, which means that winter won't kill them. They will sail through the winter. In the spring, they start growing back. And there are certain cover crops that will winter kill, which means low, as soon as it hits 32 Fahrenheit and below, that cover crop is going to die. So it's not going to survive. So understanding which cover crop will successfully grow here, and both have their uses, and I'll explain that. And how will this cover crop fit in my garden? Is it too small? As I said, size doesn't dictate whether you can put a cover crop or not. But of course, you want to see the dimension where your plots are. Is there Is it in a spot where you can bring in a small tool to terminate your cover crop? Is that possible? So think about all those things. And also, how and when will I plant? What's the appropriate time of seeding cover crops, and what is the time to terminate them? And finally, the most important point here is, how do I terminate the cover crop? Uh, we never want to be in a situation where in the spring, it's peak time for you to plant, you are ready, you have your gloves on, you have your shovels and your trowels, but the cover crop which you planted is still there and you are not able to terminate it. You're not able to kill it. So now you will be against cover crop because you said, hey, I'm not able to plant because that cover crop is still there. So understand how you can terminate the cover crop. It's very important. So ask these questions before you start using cover crops or getting interested in cover crops. So there are challenges when we manage cover crops, and there are certain things which you need to consider. One is the seed cost. How much does the seed of the cover crop cost? Depending on the species of the cover crop, the seeds could vary anywhere from 50 cents a pound of seed to anywhere $3 or $4 for a pound of seed. So the cost varies. Of course, in the backyard, you're not using a lot of cover crops, so it might not be coming into play. But for commercial growers, that's an important question to ask. Management costs, how are you going to plan them? Are you going to just broadcast it, or do you have a small drill you can use? How are you going to kill it? Do you have a mower? Maybe a handheld string mower that will do it, or do you need to maybe have a small tiller that will till the cover crop in the soil? So all that cost will add up. How do you incorporate it? Will the cover crop interfere with the cash crop? Which means, will the cover crop still keep growing while you're growing your cash crop, or you've planted it? Will it interfere? And whether the cover crop can actually bring in more pests to your plot, or be a medium through which pests from the past season will continue on to the next season. So you want to think through all those things before you identify and decide which cover crop you want to seed. So I put this timeline here just to give you a pictorial view of when cover crops could go. This would be a typical cover cropping window where you will have your cash crop maybe starting May to maybe end of September, middle of October. May for a start of May, mostly for warm season crops such as peppers and tomatoes, eggplant. But you can actually start a little early. I mean, April, you can plant your onions. We can plant our potatoes middle of April. So there are leafy greens can go in there April. So maybe the cash crop window can extend a little bit to the left and go into April. But usually the frost in middle of October, central Iowa, is the time when most of the crops are done. And that's when you can add a cover crop after your cash crops or your main vegetable crop is done. So this is the typical window how cover crop fits in a growing season here in Iowa. Now, let's look at some options and what kind of cover crops. And I'll go through these cover crops in detail. You don't have to take down all these at this point, and I will share the PowerPoint, the PDF with Alicia, so you will have it. So I don't need to frantically take down the notes. But here I put a scenario where, let's say from April onwards, you are growing a sweet corn, or you had snap beans, or you had broccoli that was growing in April, but that broccoli will be harvested in June. And then you might plant a fall broccoli somewhere in July that will be harvested in some time in end of September. Or it could be a tomato crop starting from May to end of September, or a pepper crop. So that's a situation or a hypothetical situation where you're growing these crops. And then after that, you can plant a cover crop that will overwinter, which means these cover crops will not die in the winter. They will grow in the fall. They will slow down its growth when the snow falls, completely stop growing. And then next year, when the weather warms up, starting end of February, March, April, they start growing back again. So these cover crops overwinter. And these are some examples of cover crops that are easily available and not very expensive. Cereal rye is a most widely planted cover crop here in the state of Iowa. Wheat, you can use wheat as a cover crop. Hairy vetch, it is a legume which can be used as a cover crop, which will overwinter. And there are some clovers, especially red clover. You can plant that in the fall, and that will overwinter. So these are some overwintering cover crops for you that can be planted in the fall. Now, be careful and be mindful that the overwintering cover crops will start growing in the spring. So you need to think about ways of how you will terminate these cover crops. Are you going to mow them? Are you going to till it under? So that you can plant your cash crop. So think about the exit strategy of how to manage these cover crops in the spring. Another scenario is in this case. So let's say you had onions, or you had peas, or beans, or lettuce. Could be even tomatoes too, and maybe you might have to end the tomato a little early, end of August. But you can plant some cover crops that will winter kill, which means you do not have to be worried about how to terminate them in the spring. They will not grow in the spring because they'll be dead. The temperature, the cold temperatures here in Iowa will take care of them. They will die. So those cover crops are sorghum Sudan grass. That's an excellent cover crop grass. And again, I'll go through all these cover crops in detail. Soybeans, I mean, just regular soybean. You can use it as a cover crop because after your vegetable crop is done, you don't want to leave your soil fallow or ground exposed, and you can see soybean. Buckwheat, it's a very popular cover crop, a mixture of oats and peas. You can use mustard, and I'll talk about mustards later, or clover. I mentioned about red clover that will overwinter, but crimson clover that typically doesn't overwinter here in Iowa. North of Interstate 80, there are less chances of the crimson clover to overwinter, but the south of Interstate 80, the crimson clover might overwinter. But typically it winter kills here in Ames. So those are the cover crops. So in this case, you can see I'm planting my cover crops a little early. I'm planting them in August. Not that I have to plant them in August. So let's say I plant them in September. It's okay. But it'll have only those 6 weeks of growth, because middle of October, the frost will come. Or maybe end of October, it will kill. So if I plant these cover crops later in the season, you don't get too much of the biomass of the crop. But if I plant a little bit early, then I can get a bit more biomass, more vegetative growth on these cover crops. So these are the cover crops that will winter kill. Now, let's get into seeding, or how do you establish this cover crop? You do not need a very heavy end machinery or a drill to seed your cover crop. Basically, you can use your hands and just broadcast the cover crop seeds in there. And you can see in this case, it's one of the plots at the Horticulture Research Station. We are just using hands and just spreading the cover crop by hand. And then I will eventually come with a rake and just rake it so that the cover crop and the seeds get a nice, cover crop seeds get a nice seed to soil contact. And so raking definitely helps. You don't want to leave just the cover crop of the soil surface. So rake it. And if possible, if you can water it, great. But if you're not able to water, then maybe seed the cover crop just before the rain. But that additional moisture helps the cover crop seed to germinate and quickly establish. So if there is an option to water, I highly recommend water. Looking into some cover crops now. So seeding, as I said, you can just broadcast by hand. What are some cover crop options? So let's get into individual cover crops. So let's talk about cereal rye. So you can see a large plot out there. This is cereal rye in the spring. This is sometime in May, end of April. You can see a decent grass cover crop. It's a grass. Cereal rye is a grass. It's a versatile cover crop. It germinates in cold soil. So you can seed the cereal rye cover crop in September, beginning of September. You can seed it in the end of September. You can even seed it in the middle or the end of October, or even sometime into November, because all it takes is, as long as the soil temperature is 38 degrees Fahrenheit, those seeds will germinate and establish. So it's a very versatile cover crop and can be planted way late into the winter. The seeding rate on a commercial scale, we go by 60 to 90 pounds to an acre. But I put these number there so you can visualize it. For 1,000 square feet plot, so let's say 100 feet by 10 feet plot, you would need about 1.5, 1.5 pounds. So not a lot of this cover crop, 1.5 pounds for 1,000 square feet. And as I mentioned earlier, you can plant late. So this is the cover crop that will overwinter. So you have to think of how you're going to terminate it. So early in the spring, you either go and mow it fully to the ground. Sometimes it does grow back, but typically if you mow it really well, it won't. But the one way to ensure that the cereal rye doesn't come back is to just till it under. If you can till it, or you can use a spade and just turn the soil so that the roots are uprooted and the plant goes back in the soil. You mix it well. then it will not come back. But again, that has to be done early, sometime in end of March or maybe in the middle of March to make sure this cover crop doesn't grow, because this cover crop grows rapidly in the month of middle of April to middle of May. It grows quite a lot, maybe sometime even 8 inches in a week, so it can grow really fast. Cereal rye has several benefits. In this picture, I would like to highlight is that hole in the middle. That's because of the earthworms. So cereal rye, the root system encourages earthworm development and growth, and it maintains their population in the soil. So when you add a cover crop that overwinters, the root system benefits many of the soil microorganisms and the microorganisms, in this case, the earthworm. You can see in this case, this is from my colleague Jim Hoorman from Ohio State. That white stuff which you're seeing, that's actually fungal hyphae. So because of the cover crop, the rye in there, there are mycorrhizae, there are fungal hyphae that are covering the soil. They are not allowing the soil to wither away, so it's increasing the aggregate stability of the soil. It improves biology in the soil. So this is actually good to see that in the soil, that root of the cover crop is actually benefiting the soil. These cover crops roots can go really deep. This is cereal rye. This is from my colleague Tom Casper from the National Lab for Ag and Environment. And Tom measured for several years what the rooting depth of cereal rye is, and you can see this is almost 36 inches. So about 3 inches, 3 feet. That's how deep those cover crop roots can go. You can see that if you follow that image, see those white root, those are all root going all the way down. Now, this is more maybe the science nerd in me. I wanted to make sure that you understand that there is a difference between cereal rye and annual ryegrass. People use it interchangeably, cereal rye, or they might say ryegrass, and they would mean cereal rye, but those are two different plants. Cereal rye is Sickle cereal, and annual ryegrass is Lolium multiflorum. Both of them will overwinter here in Iowa, so no problem. The cereal rye grows really tall. Annual ryegrass doesn't grow that tall, 2 to 3 feet. Again, if you're using it as a cover crop to overwinter, both will do a great job. You don't have to worry. Annual ryegrass has shown some resistance to herbicides. If you're using herbicide to kill your cover crop, by the way, you can do that too in the spring. You can spray a herbicide to kill your cover crop. It has shown some resistance. But generally speaking, you can use both of them, cereal rye or annual ryegrass. Another grass which I want to highlight is the Sorghum Sudan grass. This is a great flower crop. You can see the picture here, how the Sorghum Sudan grass looks like. It is usually planted in the summer. It loves the summer. It loves the heat. But I know that in the summer we are growing a vegetable. We don't want to plant a cover crop where the vegetable is. But if the vegetable is harvested early, sometime in end of July or in the beginning of August, if you are able to plant a cover crop in August, I would highly recommend planting Sorghum Sudan grass. You can see the growth back there, completely smothers the weeds. There are no weeds that will grow there, puts a decent amount of biomass. The seeding rate is not very high, 1 pound for 1,000 square feet. So not a lot. Rapid growth, great soil builder, and it winter kills. If you remember the picture I showed you earlier, Sorghum Sudan grass will winter kill in Iowa. It will not survive. So you don't have to worry about terminating it in the spring. Sorghum Sudan grass does have some allelopathic properties, and that is you have to be more careful if you are immediately planting a vegetable crop after terminating Sorghum Sudan grass in the same season. So let's say you grow Sorghum Sudan grass from May and you grew it till July, May, June, July, 3 months. And then in July, you decided to plant lettuce or some other, maybe a brassica crop. And at that time, when you terminate the Sorghum Sudan grass, you have to wait for about 7 to 14 days before you plant your next crop. That's because it has some allelopathic properties. But if you are seeding the cover crop, this particular cover crop in August, and the winter kills it, then you don't have to worry. In the spring, you come, the ground will be very nice tilt and very soft. You can maybe just have a rake and just rake all the Sorghum Sudan grass in, or you can level it up and you can immediately plant. That's okay. But if you're planting immediately after termination, then it can have allelopathic properties. And I'll show you how it looks like. So in one of the experiments here at the Horticulture Research Station, this is in the fall, in August, I planted a butterhead lettuce. So on the left-hand side is the control plot where there was no cover crop and we planted lettuce. And in this one on the right, we had sorghum Sudan grass. We incorporated it in, put the plastic mulch, and we planted lettuce. And that lettuce never grew. And you can see how pale yellow colored it is, not green, because sorghum Sudan grass, one, it has allelopathic properties, so it suppresses the growth, and it also ties up nitrogen. So that is why this happened. But again, if you're planting it in the fall, the winter takes care of it. In the next spring, you're coming and just preparing the ground and planting, you won't see this, but you would see it if you immediately plant after termination. Another grass is oats. In this picture, you see the middle image here, that these are oats. Great cover crop. It grows quickly. It can be planted early fall. So typically July, early, like August. You can still plant it in September. That's fine. You'll only get a month and a half of growth because October, the frost will take care of it. But it's a good cover crop. As I said, quick growth, seeding rate, again, about a pound to 1,000 square feet. And very versatile. It grows really well and establishes really well here in Iowa. There are a few new cover crops that are emerging here in Iowa and the Midwest. And one of them is called teff, T-E-F-F, Eragrostis teff. This is a cover crop from Africa. It is a very drought-tolerant cover crop. It has good biomass. So this grass is what you see here was planted in June, middle of June, and this picture was taken somewhere in the middle of August. So in 2 months, look at the growth of that cover crop. It helps to completely smother the weeds. No weeds grew in that plot because that cover crop did not allow the weeds to grow. A lot of biomass, and it winter kills. So if you have an opportunity, if you can plant early, like early in the fall, August possible, or maybe end of August, you can still plant teff as a good cover crop. Again, it's a very small amount. You can see the other cover crops were like a pound to 1,000 square feet. This is 100 grams. This is very, 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 very small amount because this is what the teff seeds look like. They're very tiny, so you have to be very careful. It's 100 grams, so maybe just a handful of that for 1,000 square feet. So that's the amount you need. You don't need a lot. It suppresses weeds. It's a great cover crop that suppresses weed. Moving into now the broadleaf cover crops. So we covered some of the grasses. This is a cover crop called buckwheat. You might have already grown it, or you might have seen it growing. It takes only 45 days from the time you seed to the time you see this picture, like with flowers. 45 days, it will grow well, produce the seed, cover the plot completely. Again, no weeds at all, adds a lot of organic matter. It is a good cover crop to attract beneficial insects. Seeding rate is not very high, roughly about a pound for 1,000 square feet. Quick growth. And when one need to be careful is that if you're planting it in the summer, so let's say you planted it May or June, 45, 50 days, it'll be like this. You have to quickly terminate it at that point because otherwise the flowers will produce seeds and it'll fall in the soil and it'll come back again. So it'll become a weed for you. So you need to terminate that. But it's an excellent cover crop to attract beneficials and quick growth and suppress weeds and add organic matter. Look at the organic matter. This when I till this under, and I can easily mow it. Even a string mower or a lawn mower, if I take it over it, this cover crop is done. So a good way to add organic matter. Showing you some examples. This is with a commercial grower, John Crowell in Mount Vernon, and we tested some of these cover crops at his site. This is 3rd of June is when we seeded, and this picture was taken on 16th of July, so about 45 days, 6 weeks. Showing you some examples of how cover crops help to suppress weeds. This is buckwheat. You can see that nice, good stand of buckwheat. This is the plot where we seeded buckwheat. This is the plot where we did not seed anything, no cover crop. And you can see when you do not have a cover crop, the plot has been taken over by buttonweed, there's red root pigweed, there are lamb's quarter, there are different grasses in there, there's foxtail in there. I mean, you name it. So by adding a cover crop, look at this picture here, you eliminated those weeds, or you did not allow them to grow. You smothered them. So that's another advantage of using cover crop, is that they help to suppress the weeds. Some other promising cover crops that we are testing, which you do not much find in the market, but a great alternative or new alternative is brown top millet. It's a grass. You need about 1 pound for 1,000 square feet, so not a lot. You can see just like how millet grows, you can see some of the heads just forming. Again, this will not overwinter here in Iowa, so you can plant after your main crop is harvested, end of August, beginning of September, you can plant into millet. Now, these crops would love the heat, so they like the middle portion of the year, but again, they will still grow, and the winter will take care of it. You don't have to worry about terminating them in early spring. Moving into legumes, because there might be an interest, or you might be interested in reducing your fertilizer input and add some kind of a legume cover crop that helps to fix atmospheric nitrogen and add more biology to the soil and reduce the amount of synthetic input. So in the legumes, when you plant them in the soil, the roots of the legumes form this symbiotic relationship with the bacterium called rhizobium in the soil. So rhizobium and the roots of your legume plant form the symbiotic relationship, and the bacterium lives inside the roots. So you see these nodules on the root. This is where the nitrogen is being fixed. So you can add a lot of nitrogen. This bacteria will pull the nitrogen from the air and fix it in the soil. So that way you can limit the amount of nitrogen. So legumes are a great cover crop, not only for organic matter, also for weed suppression and for nitrogen fixation. So I talked about this microorganism called rhizobium. So your soil need to have a specific rhizobium in the soil that forms symbiotic relationship with this legume. Okay, so I listed some of the cover crops on the rightmost column, the plant. If you have peas, or you have vetches, or the cover crop is a clover, or the cover crop is a bean, all those need a specific type of rhizobium, and that rhizobium leguminosarum. If you are planting soybean, the green row, a soybean, you need a rhizobium that is rhizobium fredi. Now, we don't know whether these rhizobium are in the soil or not. So as a guarantee, and to ensure that the rhizobium is there and it forms symbiotic relationship with the cover crop which you are seeding, you should inoculate your cover crop seeds with this rhizobium. So you can buy rhizobium specific strains. They come in small packets. So here is an example. This is a company called X Seed, and this is it's a small packet, maybe this big. It can form symbiotic relationship with pea, vetch, and lentil, another cover crop. And you basically do is you just spread it, you mix it with the cover crop seed in a bucket or in a container, and then you just spread the cover crop in the soil, just like how you would seed a cover crop, and that's it. So that way you ensure that the right rhizobium is in the soil that will help fix nitrogen. And I'll tell you why. Look at this example where this is at the Horticulture Research Station. We inoculated yellow clover with a specific clover, so Rhizobium leguminosarum. On the left-hand side, we did not inoculate those seeds. On the right-hand side are the seeds that we inoculated, and we grew them for an extended amount of time. We grew them for almost 4 months. We seeded them in June, like end of May, June, and we grew them all the way till September, October. And you can see in this case, the seeds that were inoculated, the rightmost one, look at the size of the root, that's one. And if you see closely on those roots, you see those nodules. There's several nodules there, which means by inoculation, we ensure that there is enough rhizobium and they're fixing nitrogen, and there is more nitrogen that is pulled from the atmosphere and put into the soil. So inoculation is critical. You need to inoculate if the goal was to fix atmospheric nitrogen. This is the raised bed. This is a picture I pulled from the web, and you can see on the raised bed, they have planted Austrian winter peas. This is Austrian winter pea. Seeding rate is again about 1 pound for 1,000 square feet. You can plant them in early fall. This will winter kill. Usually it will winter kill. But you can plant it in the spring also if you have some time, a month and a half, and you can just mow it and plant your vegetables soon after this. But just to show you an example that on raised beds, you can do cover crop. You don't have to have like level big area to do cover cropping. So Austrian winter peas are also good legume, which can be used as a cover crop. And when you pull the roots out, you can see that those nice pink nodules. This means that nitrogen fixation was happening. and you added nitrogen to the soil. So somebody asked, many people are interested of how much nitrogen did I add? Now, this depends on many things. How did your cover crop grow? Was there enough rhizobia in the soil? Did the plant grow big? Were there enough nodules? And on an average, we say about 40 to 50 pounds per acre of nitrogen. That's the amount of nitrogen these cover crops can contribute to the soil. Hairy vetch, another legume. This will overwinter, so you need to be careful. You have to terminate it before it goes to seed, because it's very difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to given the growth. You can see how it looks like in the spring. This is sometime in May. Sometime the mower gets clogged. This is so much of biomass. So I'll be a little bit careful of using heavy vetch unless you have a bigger equipment to terminate it. But it can fix a significant amount of nitrogen, anywhere from 70 to 150 pounds per acre. You don't need a lot, about half a pound for 1,000 square feet. That's the amount of cover crop you need. It can be planted in combination with cereal rye. They are companion crops. Termination could be a challenge, so be careful if you plant heavy vetch as a legume. This will overwinter, and sometimes the biomass is so much that it's very difficult to terminate that cover crop. Some other legumes that can be planted and that will winter kill. This is sun hemp, about a pound for 1,000 square feet. It's a legume, again, will fix nitrogen. Make sure you inoculate it. You can see how it grows. It grows upright. This is 2 months of growth, but this growth was in the summer. Again, we seeded this in June and we are terminating it in August. So it has all that summer to grow. So that's why it's big. But if you're planting in August, by the time your frost comes in October, it won't be this big. So cowpea, again, a legume, fixes nitrogen, good biomass, and about 2 pounds is what you need for 1,000 square feet. Crimson clover, again, a legume. You're still on legume. This may or may not overwinter, as I said, depending on where you are. Typically, north of 80, Interstate 80 doesn't overwinter, but south of 80, it could. So you have to be careful. It's not very difficult to terminate this cover crop, and especially if it overwinters in the spring. This is what it looks like. Beautiful, nice crimson color, and you can mow it and you can plant directly into it. Now, again, fixes nitrogen. If you're planting it, typically when we plant is about 6 to 7 weeks before a killing frost. So beginning of September or end of August is when we will plant crimson clover. So October, the frost will take care of it. You don't need a lot, about 0.7 pounds. So let's say half a pound, a little more than half a pound for 1,000 square feet. So it can also be used as a companion plant with rye. So we covered several legumes, right? We looked at sunham, there was cowpea, there is the clovers. These are good cover crops as legumes. Austrian winter peas, that can be used in our backyards, in the gardens, especially when you are trying to focus on nitrogen input, try to increase nitrogen in the soil. The next set of cover crop are Brassica cover crops. So as the name suggests, these are cover crops that are in the Brassica family. So this could be yellow mustard, there could be a brown mustard, it could be radishes, oilseed radish especially, and they're cool season cover crops, and they will not overwinter. So they will winter kill here in Iowa. They are fall planted, so typically 6 to 7 weeks before the killing frost. Good erosion control, biofumigant, and I want to explain what the biofumigant is. So maybe in the next slide I'll explain. But biofumigation, just keep that thought in mind. Biofumigation, it helps to suppress nematodes. If there are nematodes, if there are issues in the soil where you feel like there is some disease lingering and you are always worried about why is this part of my garden not performing well, maybe you should try using a cover crop like a Brassica cover crop that could help to limit some of the growth of the pathogens in the soil. And it's not just 1 year, you might have to try a couple of years. And they could be as a no-till option. Again, they will winter kill. So ground will be nice and soft when you're coming there next spring. So just to show you an example, this is yellow mustard here. This is the grower Greg Reinhardt in Boone. We did several trials at his place with some different cover crops. So this is yellow mustard, and he loves it. He likes it. He uses that, and he also uses oilseed radish, which he's more into. And I'll show you what that looks like. But again, for seeding, for the yellow mustard, very small amount, 100 grams per 1,000 square feet, so not a lot. These are very small seeded crops, late fall, 35 to 40 days from seeding to flowering. And of course, if you're planting it in August, by the time it comes to flower, the winter will take care of it. The frost will kill it, so you don't have to worry about the bloom and terminating them. But if you're planting it in this a little earlier, you need to terminate it as soon as it goes to flower. Oilseed radish. Okay, this is a cover crop that is gaining a lot of popularity for the last decade or so, because one, it is a cover crop that is in the Brassica family that has long taproot system. So you look at this oilseed radish on the left-hand side. So when you grow a crop like this, which is going into the soil, it is helping with many things. It reduces the compaction in the soil. It's creating those holes and channels where water can go in. It brings air into the soil. There are more microorganisms that move around. So it's a good soil conditioner. So oilseed radish, oriental mustard, not big of a taproot system. Yellow mustard, you can see that. Brown mustard. So depending on what mustard you choose, you can get different morphologies and different root structures. But remember, I talked about biofumigation. So what biofumigation means is, fumigation means basically to kill, right? You're fumigating it. So biofumigation is the crops in the mustard family. So yellow mustard, oilseed radish, brown mustard. When you till those cover crops in, or when you macerate this macerate those leaves, or you till it, you have to till it. You cannot just let it winter kill and expect the biofumigation to happen, because for biofumigation to happen, the crop has to be tilled under or chopped. And what happens in the cells of the plants, these Brassica plants, the unbroken cells, there are two compounds. There's myrosinase and there's glucosinolates. But when the cells are macerated, they are mashed, they are tilled or mowed, the cell breaks, and then you can see there's a reaction and several reactions. And in this reaction, one of the products that come out is called isothiocyanate. Isothiocyanate is a biofumigant. It's a killer. It's cyanate. It's similar to cyanide. So having the isothiocyanate helps to fumigate the soil. So any of those nematodes, those bad fungi, these fumigants try to suppress them. That's why it's called biofumigation. It's biological. You did not add any chemical. It's just the plant which did that. So to fumigate the soil, you may want to use Brassica cover crops. Finally, I want to give you some sources. This is from Practical Farmers of Iowa. This is an older list. You might be able to find newer lists, but there are several companies and vendors out there that sell cover crop seeds. So you can look at this. You can go to their website and check what the availability are. One of the cover crop vendors, we have used two of them actually. Albert Lee, which is just north of us near the Minnesota border. You cross into Albert Lee, Minnesota, and there's a company called Albert Lee cover crop. Just put Albert Lee cover crop. You will find their website. They have most of the cover crops I mentioned. Another one is the cover crop called Green Cover Seed. It's all one word, Green Cover Seed. I think it's Green Cover Seed, not seeds, but you can experiment with that extra S. So greencoverseed.com. It's a company based in Bladen, Nebraska. And their website is very nice. They have all these cover crops listed, benefits. They have different mixtures of cover crops you can buy. And the one good thing I like about that website is that it gives the price. It tells you how much will a pound of hairy vetch cost, or cowpea cost, or Sorghum Sudan cost. And then if you want just 2 pounds, just buy 2 pounds. You don't have to buy a 50-pound bag or a 25-pound bag. So that's the one thing I like about it. The pricing is there straight. So depending on how much you need, you can buy. So there are several sources now for cover crop seeds. There are several resources which we here at Iowa State University have. Right now, these resources are most for commercial growers, cover crops and vegetable production system, short duration cover crops for vegetable production. Again, you can download these publications. They are free. Crop rotations, the composting and cover crop. And then finally, the last one is called Managing Cover Crops Profitably. It's from the North Central SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. It's a USDA body, and the link there, you just type North Central Sayre, you'll go there and put this managing cover crops profitably. It's a free download. It's a free PDF, just like our publication. Excellent source. This is my go-to book if I want to learn about cover crops. So I would highly recommend downloading that PDF, Managing Cover Crops Profitably. It's a great resource to have. You can, if you like, if you're a person who likes to have a hard copy, it's $10. You can order through their website. But if it's PDF, it's free. It's free to download. So those are some resources out there for you. And finally, before I leave, I just want to explain why it is important again to plant cover crops. The diversity of the above ground biomass. The root system of the cover crop, the exudates that come out, they actually benefit and affect the soil in different ways. So depending on the root depth, depending on the morphology, these exudates, when cover crops go into the soil, they help with biofumigation, they help with feeding the microbes. The rhizobium out there helps with nitrogen fixation, organic matter when you till it under, or when the winter kills the cover crop, all that organic matter goes into the soil. It cycles the nutrient, because in the fall, that cover crop would have taken the nitrogen from the soil, which otherwise would have leached. Now, when it goes back, you sequestered, you did not allow that nitrogen to leave your system. You brought it up in the cover crop. When it decomposed, it went back, and then you planted a vegetable after that. So you were able to use that nitrogen, which otherwise could have been. So there are many benefits of using cover crops. And if you're interested, reach out to us, myself, Aaron Style, Alicia. We'll be more than happy to help you out to figure out, what's the right cover crop for you to use. But do consider using cover crops. And cover crops are not the only answer to add organic matter. Compost, great resource, does many of these things which we mentioned here. But with cover crops, that benefit of reducing soil erosion, reducing compaction, creating a habitat for beneficial insects. When you have this foliage, when you have that biomass there, many beneficial insects come into your system. So those are the benefits of having cover crops. This is an example from one of our publication. Again, this is mostly for commercial growers, but in this one, we try to show what a crop rotation could look like. This is different example from year one if you go from left year one all the way to year 4. So same plot, there are different examples. Example 1, example 2, 3, 4, and 5, some vegetable crops and what cover crop can follow that vegetable crop. So example 1 shows you all the way down 4 years in the same plot, what can be done. Again, this is more for commercial use, but I put it there in case you're interested of, okay, what cover crops can we use and after which crop. Now, I talked about pest cases, like I talked about pest issues with the cover crop. So giving an example, you planted, let's say you had, in the spring, you had broccoli. You grew broccoli in the spring, you harvested it in June. You might have had maybe one more crop, or let's say a lettuce after that, and you finished that, and then you planted mustard, or you planted oilseed radish. Now, in that case, you need to be careful because you had the Brassica in the beginning, in the spring, that broccoli you grew, and then in the fall, you again have a Brassica cover crop. And in the spring, next year, again, if you grow a Brassica, whatever disease was there in Brassica will just keep continuing because there was a host for that pathogen to continue. So you need to break that cycle. So that's where crop rotation comes. Try to mix the families of the crops so that pests and diseases don't just keep moving down the chain and year after year. So be careful of what cover crop you choose and what crop you had before that cover crop and what you're growing after that cover crop. So soil building process, there are many, many ways you can do that. Cover crops are one way. You can add compost, you follow crop rotation, you can use no-till, make sure you irrigate properly so there's good microbial diversity and biology in the soil. You can do strip till. I mean, there are many things which mostly, I give this an example for commercial growers, but many of the elements are true for small scale gardens as well. So when we do all that, that's when we get those biologically active soil. You help the soil, you did not let it erode. The root system of the cover crops help to feed the microbes, add organic matter, pull the nutrients up into the upper profile. So there are many, many benefits that these cover crops provide. So with that, I just want to, I want to thank many of the graduate students who have gone through my lab, who have many of the pictures are from different experiments and projects which we had at the Horticulture Research Station, different funding agencies like the USDA, NIFA, the Iowa Department of Agriculture, North Central SARE, and different partners to help us to disseminate with the outreach aspect. Iowa Specialty Crop Growers Association, the Practical Farmers of Iowa. So everybody plays their role, and we are super thankful, very thankful to all of these agencies and the grad students who help continue the research on cover crops and building soil. So with that, I'll be more than happy to answer questions.